Hello, everyone, and welcome to our History Career Night. We're just going to wait a second while we get a few more of our attendees showing up. But in the meantime, I'll introduce myself. My name is Doug Huckville, and I'm from the Undergraduate Recruitment Office at Carleton. And before we start, actually, I just would like to say that Carleton University acknowledges the location of its campus on the traditional unceded territories of the Algonquin Nation. Quite honestly, this is one of my favorite events that we do, mostly because it's an event where we've invited both prospective students and current Carleton students, which it's just a great combination because I looked at our registration and we had students who were in grade 11, who were in grade 12. I know we have current students who are also going to be attending. And for those of you who are in grade 12 right now, it's a pretty exciting time. You're just about to, oftentimes you may already have, but you're thinking of where you're going to be going for next year. And that's a night like this is a really good chance to learn more about history and also the career paths that you could possibly have. And we've got a great group of panelists to talk about some of those things over the next 30 minutes or so. After that, we're going to open it up to question and answer. So if anyone has a question, there's a chat function that you'll find on your screen there, and you can type a question in, and then we'll have the panelists available or anyone who's here available to answer those questions. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to introduce Professor Susan Whitney from our history department. Susan is also the history undergraduate advisor. I personally have known Susan for a long time, and I can tell you without question, she is a perfect example of the kind of faculty members and professors you're going to find in the history department. They're extremely knowledgeable, very great in their areas, but also care a lot about the students and their success, both while they're students and what they do after they graduate. So I will pass things on to Susan.
Thanks a lot, Doug. It's always a pleasure to do anything with you, including this night. Well, we're, as Doug said, very excited about our panel. We have 4 terrific panelists. We have 1 current student and 3 recent graduates who are going to reflect on their time at Carleton and also talk about how the skills and approaches that they learned in their history courses have equipped them for a range of professional jobs. And just to repeat and underline how we're going to organize things, I am going to introduce each speaker. They will speak, and then at the end, Doug will field your questions. All right. Now, our first speaker is Sarah Hamm. Sarah is a third-year student who is a double major in history and English, and she has recently been named a summer research intern, which is a very big honor at Carleton. Sarah has mentored incoming students in the First Year Connections program, and she's also completing the co-op option, which allows undergraduates to gain paid work experience as they complete their academic studies. Sarah will be reflecting a bit on how they bring all this together. Sarah?
Yeah, can everybody hear me? Hello. So as Susan said, I'm Sarah. I'm part of the co-op program, double major in English and history. And through the co-op program, I've had a lot of experience with different kinds of positions that you can obtain with a history degree, without having graduated, that is. So my first co-op term I spent with a company called Geotech, and I was doing content marketing, which is a bit of a left field choice for a history degree, but I ended up really liking it and finding that it fit a lot of the skill set I was learning within my degree. And as Susan mentioned, I have an upcoming co-op term this summer with the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences research internship. So what that is, it's a really exciting opportunity where I made a proposal about something I wanted to research, submitted that, and I got selected to do this research throughout the summer, and this is a paid opportunity. So I'm really excited to get that started. Some other different experiences I've had on campus, I worked with the Students as Partners project over last summer. So what we were doing was I worked as a partner to a professor redesigning a course that he had previously taught and I had previously taken. And so that was both adapting it to the sort of digital era, which we're all becoming familiar with, as well as revamping the syllabus and working with new texts. We reached out to a bunch of archives, asked if they had any material they wanted us to help annotate, and we actually got a great partnership with an archive where we worked to annotate the interviews that they had in their archive for a really long time. Another less history-focused position was first-year mentoring, where upper year students, such as myself, are assigned a few first-year students to basically mentor. So that's socially, it's academically. We would meet once a week for the first 6 weeks of school, and I would help them go through their Carleton Central profiles, figure out which courses they had to take, ask how they were adjusting and sort of work with that. And also we got to just basically get to know each other. And so if you're a new student coming in, that's really handy to just have somebody who already knows the campus, knows the environment. So that was a great experience. I was also asked to say, especially in light of my content marketing deviation from the degree, how history skills have been applicable to my work experiences. So I found that a lot of what I learned in my degree, such as research, writing, it really transfers into a bunch of different areas which you are able to then work in. For example, Geotech is a concrete technology company, but I would say I did a very good job doing its content marketing, because I was able to use those history skills of researching the products, researching sustainable concreting, all these sorts of things that I had no idea about. And then synthesizing that information the way you do with an essay and communicating it to a public. And you're going to have sort of a different message than when you write an essay. So you'd have a thesis that you're arguing, whereas when you're writing a blog post about a product, your argument is going to be why the consumer should buy the product. So different angles on a similar way of writing. You're still trying to persuade your audience. As well, the internship I'm doing this summer with the research definitely lines up with my history degree. The research I'm doing is actually inspired from one of my classes where I was learning about American war resistors, and I found a really cool archive of interviews and photos from the 70s. And I decided I wanted to pursue it further, so I submitted my proposal. And now, if you check back in after the summer, I'll be able to tell you all about what I research. And then finally, I wanted to say just what I love so much about the history department. And don't tell my English major, but it is my favorite major. So I find the profs are really, really approachable. I haven't had a prof that I've been sort of like reluctant to approach. I always visit office hours. That's one of the best suggestions I can give is go to your prof's office hours and talk about stuff you're interested in, be it the course material or just your own personal interests, especially in their field. I found them approachable. I found great, interesting, interactive courses. And then a special shout out, of course, to the History Undergraduate Society, which is the short form is called HUGS, and that's really the atmosphere they give. They're very friendly and welcoming. We've shifted to a digital environment, and I'm getting to know people through Discord, other history majors, history minors, people who just like history. So there's really this atmosphere of not only academic excellence with the professors and the teaching they offer, but also I find I've met a lot of people who just like me, like really enjoy history. So if that's you, we would be happy to have you on campus. I think that's almost the end of my time, so I will throw it back to Susan.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Sarah. And I'll just say for those of you who will be joining us next year that Sarah gave you 2 terrific tips for first year. First of all, that you should try to do the first year mentor program because that is a really terrific way to start your time at Carleton. And second of all, you should visit your professors during their office hours. Those are 2 terrific tips. All right, let me turn to our next speaker, who is Emily Lancier. And like Sarah, Emily was a double major at Carleton, but this time she combined political science with history. While at Carleton, she did a range of things. She ran study sessions for students as a past facilitator. She represented her riding on Parliament Hill at the Daughters of the Vote conference, and she spent a semester studying at the University of Edinburgh. She graduated from Carleton in 2019 and is currently finishing her MA in History at Queen's, and in fact, she just submitted her MA thesis today. And while she's doing that, she works as a junior analyst for Infrastructure Canada. Emily.
Hi, thank you very much for that warm introduction. I'm very pleased to be here for Carleton's History Career Night. As Susan said, I'm a recent-ish Carleton History and Political Science graduate and a current MA candidate in History at Queen's University. As many of you already know or will soon find out, Carleton's History Department is not only a wonderfully enriching environment to learn about history as an intellectual discipline, but it's also a place where you will discover and hone a diverse set of skills that will be valuable once you leave Carleton. Some of you will go on to graduate school or pursue other degrees, while many of you will enter the workforce. Since I'm currently doing both at the same time, I thought I might share with you some of the skills I've acquired while studying history at Carleton and how I've applied them in graduate school and as an employee working for the federal government. As a graduate student, I have benefited from learning how to think critically, conduct research, and express my thinking orally and in writing at every stage of the MA process. So from applying to graduate school, choosing my research topic, and writing the thesis, which, as Susan said, I just sent off to my supervisor this morning. History students make for very flexible students and employees. We're usually pretty good at problem solving and adapting to new challenges. For example, I went into my MA planning to study fashion and material culture, and 2 weeks into the program, I'd done a total 180-degree flip to international adoption history. These are skills that most history students are well versed in by the time they complete their undergraduate degree, and which are indispensable if you choose to go on to do your MA. Moreover, there is a huge communication and networking aspect to graduate school, despite the fact that you do spend a great deal of time hiding away in the library or in some dungy little office. As a Carleton history student, I was fortunate to have made many personal connections with my professors, which helped me tremendously as I prepared to go off to graduate school and beyond. So critical thinking, conducting research, writing well, and networking were also skills I was able to leverage during my time abroad during my third year as an undergrad. Navigating a different education system and curriculum can be daunting. Few people will offer to hold your hand through this. So being able to research independently, articulate well with others, and produce quality research was a must. All this to say that adapting to a new country, meeting new people, and traveling at every possible opportunity while taking courses at a pretty rigorous university was not only possible, but hugely enjoyable because I knew how to do all of those things independently. Finally, these skills have been a huge asset in the workforce. So I'm a junior analyst at Infrastructure Canada, where I work on project oversight for large infrastructure projects in the 4 West provinces. My training in history has helped me in ways that I hadn't really considered before accepting the position. So reading over project contracts, writing project briefs, and corresponding with federal, provincial, and municipal contacts are just a few aspects of my job that have benefited from being able to research, write, and communicate as a trained history student. Moreover, if any of you are thinking about gaining job experience in the government, I would highly recommend it since it opens many doors within the government and outside of it. And fortunately for us, history students are very attractive to hiring managers because of our unique skill set that we bring to many jobs. You know, being a history student means having a wide variety of skills that you can flex in many different ways in response to the kinds of career paths you choose to take. So if anybody has any questions regarding graduate school or working for the government, I'll put my contact information and you can contact me after. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily. That was terrific. I loved so many things that you said, including the emphasis on flexibility. I like that. I think that we're all learning the importance of flexibility this year. All right. Well, next up is Ian Worley. And I have to say that there are Few people who know the history department as well as Ian. Ian received his Bachelor of Arts honors in 2010 and his PhD in 2018. He's currently the Executive Director of the Canadian Association of Graduate Studies. Now, looking at his resume as I did for tonight, what I find most interesting is all the different jobs that he's had. He has been an adjunct curator at the Canadian Museum of Science and Technology, a historical consultant at ARC Theatre Company, a copy editor, a tour guide, a communications officer, and a historical research. And he also teaches the popular online course, A History of Oil, for us in his spare time. Ian?
Oh, geez. You think I would have figured that out by now? I'm actually new to Teams. This is only my second Teams meeting, so I'll have to get used to it. Thank you so much for the introduction, Susan, and always good to see you and the others here joining today. As Susan mentioned, I did all 3 of my history degrees at Carleton University, and with no regrets, even though that's a fairly uncommon trajectory to take. When I started my undergrad at Carleton, I had it in my mind that I did want to be a professional historian. And I was almost convinced of myself that I was heading on the way to becoming a tenure track professor. Fortunately, along the way, I had a few mentors that actually told me that there was a relatively low chance of that happening, and that I needed to think of alternative career outcomes, which is something that I started seriously considering in my master's and really developing in my PhD. So I always did kind of keep that at the back of my mind. I did end up doing a postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Calgary, and that was kind of the last step before you got a teaching position in the academy. And it was at that point that I realized it just wasn't going to happen for me at this time in my life. And so fortunately, I was able to draw on all of the other things that I had learned and all of the other skills that I had acquired in my history degree to make a transition out of an academic career path into what's now called an alt-ac, or an alternative to academic career path. And it was really only in hindsight that I realized how much I had learned outside of my kind of narrow disciplinary focus on the history of oil, which is what I looked at. And that I realized that although when you type in what can you get with a history degree into some of these job search engines, either nothing shows up or things that are so so random and diverse that it's not really worth even looking. So I realized that I needed to start looking at the skills and skill base that I had acquired, especially in the undergraduate degree. I was pretty good at research. But outside of the kind of research field in your graduate program, the other things you have to kind of teach yourself. And fortunately for me, I had quite a bit of funding at the beginning of my program and then 0 funding at the end, which at the time was kind of torturous. But looking back, it actually forced me to look at getting, finding money through other means, which brought me to things like getting a tour guide job. Doing historical tours of the city of Ottawa. I did some tutoring, which kind of got some entrepreneurial skills, built a website, started kind of a nonprofit small company. Also did some editing for an academic journal, which was a bit of a moment of revealing behind the curtains of the academic publishing industry, and that it was actually kind of not as daunting as you might think. And it was something that was actually quite accessible if you knew how to navigate it and find the right places to publish. And so in all of these activities, none of them were particularly, exciting or inspiring, and I certainly didn't make a lot of money off any of them. But collectively, they created a skill set that I could use in this alt-ac career, which I'm in right now. And one of my favorite examples of the things that I did was at one point in those historical walking tours, they needed some help during the school season. So for about 2 months, while I was finishing my PhD, I actually walked around downtown Ottawa with a cape on, carrying a lantern, telling ghost stories. And it was, horribly embarrassing. And I actually did bump into a student at the Rideau Center wearing a cape. So that was a moment I don't want to go back to. But looking back, those tours basically taught me how to speak in front of a crowd, how to come up with a narrative, how to respond to different types of people in different kind of situations and situational leadership. So it's one of those things where what you learn in a history program is not so much the content and the kind of specifics of your research project, but it's all those other skills and attributes that you can acquire along the way. And so my recommendation is to find a project that you're excited about and research that really drives you, but also to really explore all those other aspects of your life and specifically your professional development. And history students have just such a broad range of skills, as some of the other panelists here mentioned tonight. And those are in high demand. The position I'm at right now, the Canadian Association for Graduate Studies, 2 of our board members have history PhDs. I do as well. So we're actually the largest faction in the board of 13. The rest are all science based. And report after report in my industry comes out saying that history students are among the highest in what's called a well-qualified individual, or HQI or WQI. And so it's one of those degrees that does offer you such a wide range of skills and experiences well beyond what you're researching in your essay, that often don't become clear until after you're in hindsight, when you're looking back on your career trajectory. So as the others have, I'm happy to chat with anybody to have an informational interview if you'd like, to answer questions about graduate studies or about history career trajectories in general.
Great, thank you so much, Ian. I have to say that your wonderful talk reminded me of 2 of the best pieces of career advice that I've ever heard. The first one was pay attention to what you do on the side. So what is your passion? And can you figure out how to make a career out of that? And the second one is love what you do. And if you, regardless of whatever job you get given, if you do it well, that might open up opportunities for you. And this was a CEO who was talking about how his life took an entirely different direction after he took a job that he didn't really want, but it opened up all these doors because he did it well. Yes. All right. Well, our final panelist is Jeremy Whalen. Jeremy and Ian actually studied in the same year at Carleton in the history department, so he graduated in 2010. Unlike Ian, Jeremy moved immediately into full-time professional employment after getting his Bachelor of Arts honors degree. Jeremy started his career at Transport Canada, where he developed multimedia communications materials, and then he came to Carleton. He has worked in a number of jobs on campus and is currently communications officer in the Office of the Vice President, Students and Enrollment. And this means that he runs the university's undergraduate student communication and digital media strategy, including coordinating the university's social media accounts. So this is an important job. He also hosts a podcast. Jeremy.
Thanks, Susan. It's great to be here. I always love talking to history students and the community as well. And the number one thing as I'm reflecting back, listening to Sarah tonight and Ian as well, is history for me was an opportunity to pivot. When I arrived at Carleton as an undergraduate student, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I picked a major based on kind of my high school experience, and it was within the BA. And then I signed up for courses, and I realized really quickly I had more courses in history than I actually should, considering it wasn't my major. By the end of first year, it was pretty clear to me history was where I wanted to go. It was what I enjoyed the most. As Susan just said, do what you love. So I took a quick pivot. I was welcomed with open arms as a second-year student into the program, and I never looked back. I felt really fortunate. In my 4th year, I actually got to study with Ian. I think we had probably a second-year class somewhere along the line together too, but had a really cool 4th-year honors seminar with Ian and a lot of really talented history people who are still doing incredible things in all kinds of fields. And what it reminded me at that point in time, I had an application out to Teachers College, and it didn't feel right. It was like, it was the answer to the question that everybody always gave you. What are you going to do with a history degree? teach? And I was like, yeah, maybe I'll teach. I was coaching hockey. I loved helping people, but there was something about it that didn't fit. And I think I sat there one day talking to a classmate and I said, you know what? I'm going to just switch. I'm going to do something completely different. And I landed in a government job, really fortunately, because of other things I was doing. And right away, I realized what I'd never picked up on, despite working on campus in all kinds of student jobs for 2 years before that, that I was gaining skills in my history degree that really set me up to be successful more than I realized, more than I knew. I was already understanding how to synthesize text, how to write really succinct pieces, how to be persuasive with my thoughts, how to analyze big amounts of data and be really clear with what I wanted. And when I got to the federal government, I was working on a really specialized program, and something Sarah said about research skills really reflected with me earlier in the evening, and it was that ability to just apply myself to any sort of research and be able to share that knowledge with others because of what I'd learned in the program. I was working in spacecraft research and working with spacecraft technologies and learning about ocean pollution, two things I'd never for the life of me understood in my undergrad degree. And here I am reading texts coming from Sweden about how to study capillary waves. And that was because of the ability to pivot that I gained in the history program. There were so many skills that I got by doing my BA honors, the ability to analyze and synthesize text, research, writing, long hours in the library. But it was also the really cool courses that stand out to me, the opportunities to have assignments that had real world applications, because the history professors are so tied into everything else beyond academia that I felt prepared. I was writing briefing notes as assignments in courses that I know from talking to third and fourth year students, that's still the assignment today, where you're going to write briefing notes on historical topics and make recommendations. And that set me up so well for where I started. And from there, it was really, as Susan mentioned, being able to follow what I love for the next 10 years. Anytime something new came up and there was an opportunity for me to jump into it, I felt confident because of what I'd learned in the history program. I knew I wrote well enough to kind of write myself into any new corner I wanted. And then it was just the opportunity to say, okay, how do I learn a new skill? And having the ability to do the research set me up to do that. I went out and I taught myself how to be a photographer, how to do videography, how to do social media. And I don't just mean tweet like your mother or your father, or you might once in a while, but really understanding how algorithms work, how the computer side of things work, learning to code. And all of those things are self-taught that I picked up because of the research skills I had in my program. And it was that opportunity to just constantly kind of pivot and be comfortable with that and say, history's taught me that these things are going to change. The job that I have is going to change. The university life, now that I'm back on campus constantly, is always evolving. And it was something that I just felt you had so much support. History taught me, as Emily was saying, to talk to professors and to approach people who are above you and ask for advice. And then to just continue to evolve and grow. I think the program set me up so well that I'm constantly comfortable to say, you know what, I can go after that next job, or I can take that next step in my career because I gained those skills and I'm confident in them. And I know that I'm confident enough to approach somebody above me and say, hey, how did you do this? Let's talk about it. And we've heard everybody else offer that opportunity. The community here on campus was so friendly when I started, and still is, that you always felt comfortable approaching people, and it made it really easy. So now 10 years later, I find it so easy to go back and approach a student and say, hey, can I help you? Or students are approaching us all the time saying, hey, can you help? And that's what I really love about it. I think it just set us up in the right path. Being in history makes you highly qualified, as Ian said, but being in history at Carleton makes you highly qualified with a really awesome and supportive network. And when I reflect back, I think that was so important to where I am.
All right, thank you so much, Jeremy. I've been enjoying sort of picking good things out of what people have said, and you've said so many things I wanted to comment on, but I will say a couple of things. And first of all, I like the fact that Jeremy highlights that the study of history teaches us that everything is constantly changing, and there's something very liberating in that knowledge. And also, he's raised the issue of the fourth year seminar, and we take these very seriously at Carleton. And one of the terrific things about our fourth year seminars is that we offer students the possibility of doing research in amazing institutions in Ottawa. We have Library and Archives Canada in Ottawa. We have the Museum of History in Ottawa. We have, and the Museum of the Canadian War Museum has a military research center that undergraduates can use for their papers. So we really emphasize this small class experience, but also giving students the opportunity to do their own research, which, as so many of our speakers tonight, pretty much all of them have said, that learning to be a good researcher sets you up so well for learning to do all kinds of things in the job world. So thank you all for your wonderful reflections. I think we have all really benefited. And I'll turn things back over to Doug.
Yeah, I just want to echo some of the things that Susan said. I mean, it's really great to hear from all of our students, the ones who are still in the program and the ones who've graduated and gone to, and already doing great things. So we did get some questions while we were going through our panel. So I'll ask one. It's sort of one that could be answered by anyone. So maybe everyone will want to take a quick crack at this one. But did you have a favorite history class that you took? And maybe we'll start with Sarah. Did you have a favorite history class you took? You kind of look like you might have.
That's so hard because I was thinking and I was like, oh yeah, that one's my favorite. And then I thought about the two I took this semester and I'm adding those on. But if I had to choose, this is it kind of falls into Greek and Roman studies as well, which is my minor. But History 2903, the history of Greek civilization, I absolutely love. I know a lot of people, like when I was in high school, I was obsessed with Greek mythology. And then so I took courses that I was interested in that area. And then this year I realized I was halfway to a minor. So I just added it on this year. But shout out to a bunch of amazing courses. I took the history of pop culture this semester, historical representations, both of those amazing courses with amazing profs. I love those. But yeah, I could go on all day about
yeah, I'm sure.
And
it probably is hard just to pick one. But you mentioned history of pop culture. So that's a university course you took?
Yeah, so it's 3-4-10. It's currently taught by James Miller. I just finished it. The exam was due today. And it went through about 200 years in American history for like what pop culture was like. So we had stuff like P.T. Barnum. We had stuff like the first movies, vaudeville, all these different things that we went through. And it's something I've never studied before, but I saw the description. I was like, absolutely, I'm in. And I loved it.
Yeah, I think a course like that would be attractive to a lot of students, no matter what their sort of history area of interest was in particular. Anyone else want to jump in with a favorite course?
Sure. If oh no, you go ahead. You go ahead,
Okay. Emily.
So I took a bunch of really great courses, but my favorite course was Paris and the Jazz Age. And I'm not just saying that because Professor Whitney taught it, but it was a wonderful seminar. It was a fourth year seminar, and it was great because at the fourth year level, when you're doing seminars, it's a much smaller group of students and everyone is so engaged, and they're really, it's really great to listen to everybody's opinions on the readings, and you can bounce ideas off of each other. And so Paris and the Jazz Age, we talked about obviously jazz music, we talked about race and gender, we talked about fashion and world fairs, and it was really great. And so I don't think it's running next year, but if it does, again, you should definitely sign up.
Yeah, that one sounds great too. Okay, we had another question. Oh, sorry, was there someone else who wanted to add their favorite?
Well, maybe not my favorite, but I did want to comment that one of the things I really enjoyed about the undergrad, and speaking to others that went to history departments in other universities that didn't quite have this, was the ability to choose between big topic courses like Western civilization or global history even, and then really narrowly defined and precise courses on specific topics. You know, I did a course, almost the entire course on the Falklands War and their, you know, the history around that. So the ability to really go, you know, from really narrow to really broad topics was fantastic at Carleton.
Yeah, I think that is something that is definitely that Carleton does really well with their course selections and course options. Okay, so we've got another question here, and I'll kind of leave this, maybe I'll direct this to somebody. The question is, what kind of lessons, and let's say, what would be a lesson that you think you took from your history degree that you didn't necessarily think would be as advantageous to your career as it's turned out to be? That's sort of the question. So maybe since Ian, since you're on there, why don't you want to tackle that one? Was there a particular skill that you said, wow, I didn't even realize how much that was going to come in handy? You're muted, Ian.
So sorry. The ability to analyze data, I think, and information was certainly one that I use on a daily basis, especially if you get a career that's outside of your specific discipline or research focus. I'll get data or information that I know nothing about, and I need to be able to review that, to understand it, to compress it down to a few sentences, and then share that with people who also know nothing about it. So I have to learn it and then teach it. And that's something that you really do get in a history program, because often the subjects you're studying are so large that you can't know hardly anything about it, or you are taking a course because it is something that's piqued your interest because you don't know anything about it. So I took a history course on the history of China that went, I think, over 8,000 years in time span, knowing nothing about it. And when I came out of that course, I knew a little bit about China, but actually knew a lot more about being able to look at different topics and subject areas that I knew nothing about and learn them relatively quickly based on the skills that I got in the program.
Yeah, I think that's great. And maybe Sarah, I mean, you're still in the program. Is there a skill that you still want to work on? And we'll go to Jeremy right after this. But Sarah, if there's a skill that you really are still trying to develop because you know it's going to be important for your career going forward?
Yeah, so when I was thinking big skills, I think this is something you'll develop in a lot of degree programs, but history really is one that helps develop it a lot. Writing is in every job you're going to do, probably. And history really teaches you to read like large portions of text or media or something and be able to translate that into your own words. And even with writing emails, I find now in third year, I'm a lot better at writing emails than I was in first year before I'd had this experience of writing so many things. And it's not just essays, it's like notes and presentations and whatnot. So yeah, I would say writing is probably the best skill you can learn.
And Jeremy, your work in the social media area, I mean, I'm sure you found writing is a huge skill, but is there something else you picked up that really stands out to you?
Yeah, I would completely agree with Sarah. I think the writing is huge, and that's definitely one that we see when we're hiring members for our team and in my own work every day. But the one thing that I reflect back on a regular basis is the ability to respect and recognize the differences in the way things are being interpreted. And when I think back, I think about courses I took. The fourth year seminar I took with Ian specifically was in international history. And the number one question we always got asked was, whose perspective is that? And it was, are you giving the perspective that you picked up from the British texts, or are you reviewing what was being said in other countries and other people? And how was history told? Who told it and what were they telling it for? And now working in social media, who said that? Where did that comment come from? And why are they saying it? Are they already angry about something else, or are they already charged up? Is this a different situation than maybe you're interpreting? And that's led for me so much to be able to sit back and say, okay, why is this issue the way it is in front of us? What sort of information do we need to collect from stakeholders, and how do we get it back out to a broader audience? How do we serve more than one audience here? And that came from, who are we listening to and what other perspectives are we maybe missing? And that was the how is history told? And why did you interpret it that way? And so being open to different interpretations, and also thinking that people are going to interpret you in so many different ways, has really made me conscious of how I present information and the type of resources that we make available to students.
Yeah, that's a great point. Emily, did you have anything you wanted to maybe add to that?
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the skills that I've really been able to leverage out of my my time as a history student is good detective work. You know, really following those rabbit holes. And you know, when I'm working at the government right now, and I'm always poring over contracts and going through files and doing amendments and project overview. And so you really have to like dig deep and, you know, being familiar with how libraries work and familiar with how different databases work. I think that's been a huge asset to my work now, and a huge asset to lots of other jobs and career paths.
Yeah, and I think what all of you mentioned are the skills that will take you into your next steps in your career. I mean, you commented on how they're helping you now, but you know, most people expect to have many different jobs, careers, opportunities over their lifetime of work, and those are all the kind of things that will span across all the different things that you will do over your career. Okay, so this is kind of a question we got from a student who I think is maybe thinking about what they might minor in, or maybe even double major with history. Any thoughts on? Did any of you do a double major or a minor? And maybe we'll just sort of go through the list. Sarah, first, are you doing a double? You did mention, I think, Roman.
I'll bail you out so you don't have to recall what I said 10 minutes ago. So I'm a double major in English and history with a minor I just added in Greek and Roman studies.
Right. That was
so I'm biased that I would say English pairs really well with history because a lot of what you're studying is not texts from the present day, except there are courses that will focus on that. But you do go back in time with the text and you learn the social context. Greek and Roman studies pairs well because it's also history. It's just a more specific history. But in general, I would say anything you're interested in pairs beautifully. Every subject has a history.
Right. Did anyone else do a particular minor as opposed to a double major as well?
Can I just jump in for a second?
Yeah, certainly, Susan.
I mean, because one of the things I find really interesting is that the number of students doing double majors has really grown, I would say, in the last decade. So if you have, I think both Ian and Jeremy, you were both history and maybe did international history, Ian? Yeah. Whereas we see so many students, especially good students like Emily and Sarah, who want to put two or more things together. So I'm amused that Sarah has a double major and a minor, and you know, Emily had a double major, and as Sarah was saying, and I believe this very strongly, that history pairs extremely well with, as she said, English, also with political science, with religion, with anthropology. As Sarah was saying, I mean, everything has a history, and so, you know, I certainly know that first year students, when I'm teaching the course on Europe in the 20th century and they're taking political science, they really like learning the history of the people who have written the theories that they're studying. So I think they find that history complements so many other of their courses and disciplines at university.
Yeah, I think those are great points, Susan. And I think students are looking for something, you know, to be able to do things across different disciplines. You know, interdisciplinary studies and things has really grown, and Carleton is a leader in that area. And I think it just gives students a lot more options to tailor their degree to what they really want to get. There's a question here that's a little more on the friend side of things. Were you able to meet people and make friends while you're in the history department? I think everybody wants to know that. So this probably came from one of our prospective students. Maybe we'll start with Sarah. You're still in school right now?
Yeah, still in the process of making new friends.
Yeah.
I would say definitely my first 2 years. So COVID hit at the beginning of my third year, I believe. It's been so long now. And what I would do in my first 2 years, I would just come to a class I was interested in, sit down and start a conversation about the class. Because if somebody's taking that class, it's likely because they're also interested in this subject. So you immediately have something in common. And then, as I mentioned earlier, HUGS, the History Undergraduate Society, is a great resource for making friends who are in history. I met a lot of people at a board game night, and it was fun to immediately have something to do with them. There's a great lounge, I think, in Patterson, where the history department, the History Undergraduate Society meets. So there are resources on campus. I would say, if I'm giving advice here, which I'm going to because I feel like I know things, I would suggest that you go out and you make friends. Like, the more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. So if you go and start talking to somebody, you're going to get a friendship out of that, hopefully. But if you're just there to get your degree, you're probably going to shut yourself out more. So go out and make friends, and it will work. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, and I'm sure everybody has, maybe each of you could kind of give a quick story about what was a great sort of connection you made through your time in history. Ian, you want to start with one?
Sure. So I did 12 years at Carleton, so lots of time to make friends. And I did make a cohort of friends, probably 3 or 4 friends in my second year, again, just from chatting, and we all sat at the front of the class and wanted to do well, so we kind of naturally bonded. And in the end, about 3 of those students went through to that 4th year seminar that I was in with Jeremy, who also became a friend in that year. And then we went on to do our master's, and then some even our PhD. And to this day, I have friends that I made in the second year courses at Carleton, really close friends, actually. And I also made some friends, some faculty member friends at the department as well, just because taking so many courses year after year and even doing some research work for some of them, I made some fairly close friends on the faculty as well. So it's a really welcoming and inviting department, not only for academic reasons, but also for personal and friendship.
Yeah, and I think for prospective students who haven't come to university at this point yet, I don't know if they realize how much they can actually connect with faculty members and with TAs and with their upper year students, because they really, there is an environment that's created where there's, a back and forth between faculty and students and a collaborative work ethic there. And history, I think, is one of the departments that does that exceptionally well. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's another question that came up, and it's kind of it's an interesting one. Do you think that studying history helps you better be able to understand the things that are happening in the world today? Ian, you're on the screen. You want to take a shot at that one?
I was actually debating whether to say this was the best thing I learned in my history program. Just the ability to understand, even on a surface level, some of the background and context of the things we see in the news, which these days is almost every day there's something new that's coming up. And to be able to understand things like, why are people upset at police shootings, and why is there tension in the Middle East? Why are certain words more powerful in our discourse than others? And instead of just taking them at face value, a lot of these courses that you may not really remember, but all of a sudden you see something on TV, you're like, well, actually, I kind of know a little bit about that context. And I've always said that being a history student makes you a better person, because it offers you perspective and insight into other people's lives that you normally wouldn't get. So my wife did biochemistry, so she's constantly asking me questions on the news about, well, why is that, and what happened before that, and what led up to that. I ask her plenty of questions about chemistry as well, but it's one of those things that it just gives you that little extra insight onto things that you may not even know you have until you see it on the news, and you can connect the dots that way.
Anyone else want to share their thoughts on that question?
I can jump in there as well. I think to Ian's point, it's always helped me in understanding things and putting them into context, but also you kind of, through the breadth of the history program, and it's what's awesome about Carleton is the different variety of courses that you can take while studying history. You pick up so many little pieces of knowledge and little pieces of information here and there that stuff comes up and you're like, yeah, I have heard of that, or I know a little bit. Like, as Ian was mentioning, you just really kind of start to see these connections. And when you don't, you develop such a thirst for knowledge in this program, where if something comes up and you don't really know about it, but you're like, that doesn't seem right, or it seems like there's something there, you feel so comfortable going and looking it up and reading not one source and trusting it, but reading 2 or 3 really quickly and saying, okay, now I think I have enough of an understanding to know why this is a big issue. maybe not to an expert's level, but now I can listen to a couple experts and start to figure it out. And it's definitely led to people asking me on a number of occasions, why do you know so many things about so many things, but nothing in particular? It probably speaks to the breadth of the courses I took over my time, but it also speaks to just how awesome the program is here.
Yeah, Sarah, Emily, did you want to add anything?
Sure. Yeah, I would also add to that and say that an education in history also allows you to see a particular issue from many different vantage points. So if you take something in the news right now, you can sort of deconstruct it from, a gendered sort of perspective, economic or policy. And I think that also adds to a more perhaps nuanced take on what's going on. So I think that's really valuable as well. And that's something that you learn in history.
Sarah, do you find that the students that you're taking your classes with now are discussing current events as well, obviously in context of the history?
Absolutely. And this is something, when we started talking about the subject, what came to mind was my course about pop culture, because a lot of the time we would go back and think, okay, these people were attracted to, say, exhibits that challenge their intellectual capacities. Is that something we see today? These people were attracted to entertainments that were just good, clean fun. Is that something we see today? And sort of like how minority groups are represented in certain aspects of entertainment. There's so much of a continuum between history and now. It's almost like it happened. So yeah, I find that like it's not even just big news items, also little things like if I'm watching a TV show and I'm like, oh, I can see the roots of like the first films that were made in sort of how they set up the shot.
Yeah, that's great. So we've kind of come to the end of our questions that have been asked. Susan, did you want to add anything before we sort of wrap things up?
No, I've as I said, I've just been so impressed, and it's been a great pleasure for me to hear these four, Sarah and then three former students reflect on all the wonderful things they learned in the history department. And it's, as someone who teaches students, it was really helpful for me to hear what they thought was important. And I was interested that, Jeremy mentioned the briefing note assignment, which my husband still does. And, this year he brought in all these guest speakers to his 3rd and 4th year classes, and including a man who's currently the Prime Minister's National Security Advisor, Vincent Rigby, who's also a graduate of our department, and so was happy to come and talk to history students. So I think, the fact that the primary National Security Advisor of Canada is a history graduate shows you that history prepares you to do all kinds of things, as our panelists have been speaking about, partly because it helps you learn how to research and process information and explain it to other people and boil things down. So I want to join Doug in thanking all of you for taking time away from your evening to join us and to do this. It was really terrific. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. I also, from our office at the Graduate Career Office, want to thank everyone for participating. It really, when students are thinking about what their university choice is or program choice is, to be able to hear from people who are in the program, who have graduated the program, who have went on to career paths, who are doing amazing things, I think it does help inspire them. And, everyone has to sort of make that choice for themselves and find something that they really care about. And it's amazing to see that all 4 of you did, and Susan as well, you have too. And so on that note, thank you to everyone for joining us tonight, and we hope you have a great night. And if you ever have any questions about Carleton or anything in the future, feel free to connect to us on our website anytime, and have a great night.